Welcome to the Partis channel. Today we explain Prophets Kings 1 chapter 8 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're diving right into the monumental dedication of King Solomon's temple, which is, without a doubt, one of the absolutely most pivotal moments in biblical history.
Now, to really wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of this massive chapter, we actually need to jump straight to its most dramatic moment, verses 10 and 11. Imagine being there. As the priests withdraw from the inner sanctuary, a cloud so unbelievably dense fills the newly built temple that they are literally physically forced to stop doing their jobs. The text tells us the glory of the Lord filled the house. It creates this unbelievable scene of absolute mystery and awe, right at the climax of years and years of intense construction.
So, to understand this staggering historical event, we are going to look strictly at the Peshat. That means the plain, literal narrative of what actually happened and what was said. You see, Solomon has just finished a grueling 7-year massive building project, and we're going to walk through this entire chapter exactly in order, really clarifying the events in the Hebrew text without getting bogged down in Kabbalah, Sod, or deep mystical interpretations. We want just the clear, simple facts of the story as it unfolds verse by verse.
Act 1, Gathering the Assembly. Let's wind the clock back just a little bit from that mysterious dark cloud to see how this grand spectacle actually gets started.
The logistical effort to kick off this dedication in verses 1 through 9 is completely massive. First off, King Solomon summons all of Israel's elders, the tribal heads, and the ancestral leaders straight to Jerusalem. This is all happening during the 7th month, Ethanim, which is the time of the major autumn festival of Sukkot or Tabernacles. And the text gets very detailed here, explaining how the priests, who are the absolute only ones permitted to do so under biblical law, carefully take up the Ark of the Covenant. This is the specific ark containing the 2 stone tablets placed there by Moses at Mount Horeb. They transport it, along with the tent of meeting and all the sacred furnishings, bringing the whole shebang up into their new, permanent stone home.
The scale of this opening ceremony is truly hard to fathom. As the ark is brought up in verse 5, King Solomon and the massive assembly of Israel stand before it, and they sacrifice an absolutely unquantifiable number of sheep and cattle. I mean, just picture this visually for a second. The path to the inner sanctuary is essentially blocked by a sea of offerings. It establishes the sheer volume of wealth and devotion dedicated to God at this moment. They sacrifice so many animals that they literally could not be recorded or counted. It's just wild.
Act 2, Solomon's Address. Following these massive sacrifices and the sudden manifestation of that divine cloud we talked about earlier, King Solomon turns around to address the vast crowd standing before him.
Notice how Solomon instantly connects the past to the present here in verses 14 through 21. He reminds everyone that while his father, King David, passionately, desperately wanted to build this temple, God declared that it would actually be Solomon who was chosen to complete the task.
And this brilliantly illustrates the transition of power and purpose. David had the vision in his heart, right? But Solomon provided the hands to build the walls and set a place for the ark. By explaining this, Solomon establishes that this grand building isn't just some architectural marvel. It is the physical, undeniable fulfillment of a long-standing divine promise made to his family. And it's really crucial to note the Hebrew concept here. Solomon emphasizes that the temple is built for the name of the Lord. In Hebrew, Shem. It's a localized point for God's presence, perfectly bridging David's dream with Solomon's new reality.
Act 3, the Great Dedicatory Prayer. Having set that historical context, Solomon stands before the altar, spreads his hands out toward heaven, and delivers one of the most comprehensive and totally fascinating prayers in the entire Hebrew Bible.
But before he starts making his specific requests for the nation, Solomon pauses to ask a really profound philosophical question. A question that actually challenges the very nature of the spectacular building he just spent 7 years constructing.
So the absolutely crucial point in verse 27 is that Solomon fully acknowledges the paradoxical nature of the temple. He states plainly, "But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this temple I have built?" He is displaying profound humility here. I mean, this massive stone building serves as a focal point, a sort of earthly compass for prayer, but he knows it absolutely cannot contain the creator of the universe. It's a place for God's name to dwell, to focus the attention of the people, but absolutely not to limit his entirety.
With that incredibly deep theological foundation set, Solomon proceeds to lay out a comprehensive, step-by-step list of potential national disasters in verses 31 through 40. First, he addresses cases of individual justice and interpersonal conflict. Then he moves on to massive national tragedies, like military defeat by an enemy due to sin. He follows this by outlining severe ecological disasters. We're talking drought, famine, blight, mildew, and terrifying plagues of locusts. In each specific scenario, he asks that when the people face these terrible hardships and direct their prayers toward this place, God will hear from heaven, forgive them, and act according to their hearts.
Let's really highlight this incredibly unexpected universal element right in the middle of his prayer, specifically in verses 41 through 43. Solomon asks that the prayers of foreigners, people not belonging to Israel who travel from distant lands because they've heard of God's great name, are also heard. This shows a remarkable, beautiful openness to the wider world, praying that all peoples of the earth may know and revere God's name just exactly as Israel does.
Moving into verses 46 through 53, Solomon shows deep psychological realism. He completely acknowledges that human failure is simply inevitable. He frankly admits, "For there is no one who does not sin." Because of this stark reality, he proactively asks for mercy even in the absolute worst-case scenario. If the nation is utterly defeated and carried away into captivity and exile in an enemy's land, he pleads that if they repent in that distant land and pray toward their homeland and this chosen city, which, by the way, indeed became the standard practice for Jewish prayer during periods of exile, that they will be heard and forgiven.
Act 4. The Benediction. After finishing this monumental, deeply vulnerable plea on his knees, Solomon rises to offer a final, roaring benediction to the vast crowd.
Verse 54 tells us that Solomon had been kneeling before the altar of the Lord with his hands spread out toward heaven. Now in verse 55, he stands up and blesses the whole assembly in a really loud voice. He declares in verse 56 that the people have finally been given rest from their enemies. And look at this powerful statement. He reminds them that every single historical promise made centuries ago through Moses has been perfectly kept. Not one single word has failed.
He then charges the people to remain fully committed moving forward. And the practical life lesson he gives them in verse 61 is totally key. He tells them their hearts must be fully committed to the Lord. The Hebrew word used here is shalem, meaning whole, complete, or undivided. He's reminding them that while the temple is a stunning physical achievement, what truly matters is their daily obedience and having a shalem heart to live by God's laws. A beautiful building can never, ever replace a wholly devoted, committed heart.
Act 5, the Grand Celebration. Let's move to our final act and see how this solemn prayer builds into an absolutely colossal, nationwide festival that concludes the dedication.
The celebration, detailed in verses 62 through 65, was off the charts. They observed the festival before the Lord for 7 days and then added 7 days more. That is 14 days in all of non-stop, joyous observance, feasts, and communal sacrifices. Why 14 days, you ask? Well, it was 7 days specifically for the dedication of the new altar, followed seamlessly by the 7 days of the standard autumn festival of Sukkot.
And this wasn't just a local event for the residents of Jerusalem. This was a vast, united assembly drawing people from Lobo Hamath all the way down to the Wadi of Egypt. Just to clarify the geography a bit, Lobo Hamath represents the absolute northernmost tip of the Promised Land, and the Wadi of Egypt represents the extreme southernmost border. This proves it was a fully unified kingdom gathering together for this monumental, unforgettable week. Finally, verse 66 tells us that when the 14 days are up, Solomon sends the people home. But they don't leave exhausted. The plain text tells us they blessed the king and went to their homes incredibly joyful and glad in heart for all the good things the Lord had done for his servant David and his people Israel. It was a deeply unifying, triumphant moment for the entire nation.
Conclusion: the legacy of 1 Kings 8. As we wrap up this explainer, let's take a look at the incredible legacy left behind by this single, deeply historic chapter.
By looking purely at the Peshat, following the plain narrative step by step, we see a masterful snapshot of a nation truly at its peak. We saw them perfectly balancing unimaginably grand stone architecture with a really humble recognition of universal human flaws, realizing that absolutely no physical structure can ever truly contain the divine.
It leaves us with this fascinating, provocative thought. If the ancients fully knew a physical building couldn't possibly hold the Creator, how does that change the way we view our own sacred spaces and monuments today? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.